Good afternoon, and welcome to the Thursday edition of NAC ReTreat Week. I'm Dan Borschke, NAC's Executive Vice President, and it is my honor and privilege to introduce the next hour of programming. I hope many of you had the opportunity to join us yesterday afternoon when we did our wine tasting with Copper Cane Wineries. It was a great experience. First experience for a lot of us drinking remote, well, maybe not drinking remotely, but at least drinking remotely with other people. So hopefully next year we'll be able to do it together, all together somewhere in Dallas when we get together later next year. First of all, many thanks to our sponsors who, without their generosity, we would not be able to conduct this week-long educational experience. Many thanks to Coca-Cola, Gold Medal, Hershey Chocolate, Mars Wrigley, Rico's Products Company, Load King, Pepsi, Vistar, Conagra, PCI, Packaging Concepts Incorporated, Promotion in Motion, Great Western, Colonel Seasons, Manel Popcorn, Odell's, Preferred Popcorn, and Scribner and Associates. Like many of our members, NAC is certainly experiencing financial distress during these challenging times. We thank all our members for their support and engagement as we all journey through this once-in-a-century experience. If you'd like to assist the NAC education efforts, please feel free to visit the donate button at the NAC ReTreat Week website page. Before we introduce today's program, let me wish that you'll be joining us this afternoon at 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, when we start discussing government relations and the topic of what the election results mean for the concession industry. Don Lear of Umberto and NAC's Government Relations Committee Chair will facilitate a star-studded panel to discuss what the returns mean for all of us. Joining Don will be Robert Perkins of Act 5 Theaters, Dan Hurl of National Amusements, as well as Dan Shorts of the National Confectioners Association, Bill McManus of the American Beverage Association, and Mike Kosinski from NAMA, the National Automatic Merchandising Association. Don't forget all the sessions today as well as tomorrow when we do our annual membership meeting have the same access code. What you got to join us today with, you'll be able to use again tomorrow and this afternoon. If you have any questions for the panelists today, please use the Q&A icon or function, and we will address your inquiry when we see it. We are proud to announce that we have well over 360 registrants for this week's sessions. All sessions this week are being recorded and will eventually appear on naconline.org. And then finally, each session will have door prizes that have been very generously provided by our members. The names of today's winners will be announced by Chris Dahman at the end of this session. He will also be making those announcements at the end of all the sessions this week, so good luck. Today's session is entitled Concessions in a Post-Pandemic World, and we thank Luis Rivera for organizing and facilitating today's session. Luis is with First Star Solutions, and he's the Chief Operating Officer and founder of the group. Unfortunately, Alan Johnson won't be able to join us today. He had a medical emergency, and we wish him well. But joining us is Martin Thorson, Vice President of Hospitality and Retail Services for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You could tell, oh, wait a minute, I can't see the logo on your shirt. There it is.
There we go.
Vice President of Hospitality and Retail Services for the Buccaneers. And then Michael Shaw, Vice President and Head of Experience and Innovation for the Miami Marlins. So Luis, again, thank you for putting this all together, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Chris, and also thank you to NAC for having us on this panel. You know, we've all been on many panel conversations over the last 6 months discussing the pandemic and discussing sports and the future of sports, and you know, I'm excited to be moderating this panel. You know, with having Martin and Mike on board. These are two individuals that operate two significant organizations in Florida. So I'm going to turn it over to Martin so he can tell us a little bit about himself, tell us about his past career leading up to the Buccaneers and what his roles are with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then Michael will follow Martin after he introduces himself. Martin?
Good afternoon. So yes, I currently work for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm Vice President of Hospitality, but also business services, having to do with the stadium operations and all of the business with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I really act as the main liaison and contract administrator for all of our legends, our hospitality partner, Fanatics, our retail and merchandise partner, and then all of our other vendor operations in the stadium, along with close interaction with the Tampa Sports Authority and all the events that we put on at the stadium. Joined the Buccaneers coming up on 2.5 years now. So really joined them to try and elevate the overall hospitality experience that was happening at the stadium. And then all of a sudden we have this COVID-19 hits, and we're thrown into a different kind of model, which is how do we relaunch? So that's what I've been focused on for the past 9 months, and that's what we do on an everyday basis. And we're starting to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, a little bit of success, but more to come. So
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you, Martin. Michael?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks, Louis. My name is Mike Shaw. I oversee innovation and experience for the Marlins. Previously I came to Miami from Amazon. I was working out of New York for a bit and was at ESPN before that, doing acquisitions and content distribution. So done a little bit of everything in the sports industry. I think what's really unique about my role with the Marlins, so I oversee all our ballpark operations as well as our innovation. And so, you know, that could be everything from retail to food and bev, concessions, or parking. And, you know, when you talk about the impact of COVID, you know, to Martin's point, you know, it's like a good buffet. It's all inclusive, right? So COVID has no respecter of persons or operations. So, you know, when you look at every part of your operation, there's something that has been impacted. And so I think, you know, during this time together, certainly look forward to hearing more from Martin's experiences. But I can tell you in Miami, you know, safetyness and the wellness of people as you think about how we tackle welcoming back fans. Everybody knows we had a shortened season with Major League Baseball. I should say shortened regular season. The playoffs were extended. And I think we've learned a lot from having no fans. But, you know, interestingly enough, I think having hosted a few events with guests and without guests, some of the rigor around just having your ball club and trying to keep them safe is just as demanding as trying to have some fans. And so there's some challenges all around, but we're trying to, you know, handle them the best we can. So looking forward to the conversation.
That's great. So I have the same question for both of you guys to start off with. What has your organization learned from COVID-19 regarding food and beverage program, and how will your organization address fan experience and elevating fan experience during the pandemic? Martin, if you want to start off.
Sure. I'm going to speak a little bit from the 25 years of being in the food and beverage side of the world for the longest time, and always really focused on that. But you know, it was interesting because food and beverage, overall hospitality in general, we've always been the leader in safety, right? It's always been an absolute. It's the price of entry. It's not even it's something you must do at all times. Health and safety is paramount with every food and beverage operation, or it should be. So we looked at it as, okay, how much of these new nuances that we're going to be doing are, number one, optics to create consumer confidence, and number two, how much of them are actual necessities of something that we haven't done before, or at least aren't the foundation of something that we've done before. And so what we really tried to do was adhere to the optics, because you're kind of in the court of public opinion at all times with this. You know, everyone has a degree of, or a level of sensitivity to the virus and what has gone on and what they feel is a safe environment. So we number one first set out to make sure that we were shoring up our entire operation, and that we could gain that consumer confidence by showing exactly what we're doing operationally. So that was the biggest learning experience for us. But we also quickly learned that we did not have a, you know, a very hard learning curve to implement different things. And we looked within ourselves and said, hey, maybe there's a couple practices that we really should have never been doing from a safety standpoint in the first place, and let's amend those. And I'll give you an example of one. You know, the industry has forever touted refillable sodas, bottomless popcorn, you name it. Well, we could still do those things because they are a fan favorite, but every refillable now needed to be a new individual serving. So that's just an example of, but at the same time, you look at that and you go, why weren't we doing that all the time? Handing over the cup over to the side. Here, if refill my cup, it's been where, what? You know, so we took those kind of learning experiences and said, hey, we should have been doing this in the first place. You know, little things like your utensils that are now dispensed single at a time from a sealed environment. We bought those for all of our suites. And you know, you only are taking the end of the utensil. It's not in a basket where anybody can put their hands in it and grab a bunch of serving pieces, right? It's individually dispensed things. So our goal was to say, how can we, number one, raise the level of safety? And that was our first goal. And that was for employees and for fans. So that's how we kind of approached it. There's many other instances that we put in and done from a learning, and the learning has been monumental. I think it shapes how we're going to continue in the future, but those were some of the highlights of how we kind of approached it.
That's great. And how are the fans adapting to walking around with their, 90-ounce tub of popcorn and not being able to refill it, or going to the concession stand and refilling the soda? Are they adapting, or they're like, hey,
we are
oh,
refilling.
so
They still go up. We're just giving them a new one.
you just give them a new one?
A brand new one, full sealed bag of popcorn. Bang, here it is. Away you go. Fits right in their bucket. They're all fine. Full sealed soda. Here you go. Fits right in their souvenir cup. So it's a very simple solution. But it's just a matter of having to look at that and go, hey, this is something that we really need to dive into. So they didn't have to adopt. We adopted to them.
Well, that makes sense. It also sounds like it's probably going to increase your throughput too, as you're handing them something versus turning around, refilling it, or handing it to somebody else and trying to expedite it. Being that with limited attendance, have you seen the increase in throughput through those different programs, or not?
Yeah, we can, as we go along, if you want to get into various different increases or decreases, or what we see in habits of consumer spend and behavior, we can now, or we can certainly move further on as you want that topic, up to everybody.
Yeah, once we hit the food and beverage side, we can probably address some of those, but it's pretty remarkable that the Buccaneers would think didn't want to take away something that the fans enjoyed so much on those refillables. And being an operator for the past 22 years in sports and entertainment venues, I mean, those refillable cups were the end all, and it's like you got to have them. So I'm glad you guys adapted well. Michael, tell us a little bit about what the Marlins have learned on COVID regarding fan experience, and how are you guys engaging? I know your season's over, but what plans are you guys putting in place for your 2021 season?
Yeah, I think Mark brought up a lot of good key points that I think overlap. I think one of the ones that I want to visit, there are three key findings. There are a lot of findings, right? A lot of things we learned, but three that I would list as in terms of priority. And I think Mark speaking on safety, right? On cleanliness, health, and safety, number one, I think everyone would say that's most important. And I think the way that we view it is that, as always, I think as any good operator, our business, we partner with Levy in operating our food and bev concession, but food, health, safety, wellness is always a priority. But I think what's well said by Martin is the optics and the explanation. I think now what we've learned is now it's top of mind for consumers, right? And so I always, in using analogies, so good back end of your food and beverage program is like a good official or a good referee, right? Because usually in a good official referee, you don't even think about it. It's like insurance. You have it, but you don't think about it, right? You just know you want food, you get the food, right? And so I think for most people, food and beverage operation is that same way. You don't think about what's happening on the back end or what's being cleaned. You just see it, you trust it, and you do it. But now the onus and priority of now it's top of mind for everyone. And so we know that just from some of our survey work and some of our conversations with members and potential members and users, it's extremely important that people understand not only what you're doing, but they understand how you're doing it and they see it. And that's what fosters some of that confidence of okay, I'm prepared to come back. And in terms of your readiness plan, how much of a priority they put and trust in what your operation is and what will be. So I think number one for us is really understanding now that not necessarily, there are certain tweaks that we made in terms of packaging and closures and sealed containers, but it's more or less even on the back end of how we disinfect and actually showing people what's being disinfected and how often it's being cleaned and how frequently. It's really important for people to understand, especially in this initial return phase. The second thing I would say is just in thinking about how people consume the information of menus, and obviously, we'll talk about mobile and being able to use URL, use your own phone. But I think even limiting options and focusing, because I think one of our priorities in terms of safety is, reducing the foot density and traffic. And so is it, Martin made a really good point about there's some things maybe we should have been doing anyway, right? And so one of the things that we try to do with our food and beverage program in Miami is really have the unique taste and flavors of Miami be representative in the ballpark. So we'll have ballpark favorites, but also what are the things that make Miami cuisine really unique? And so how do we take that and put that in a more simple format? One, so that people can really easily consume it, but also like if we think about the size of our menu boards or the font size, right? Like how do we make things more easily for people to see and digest so that they're not standing in line longer, waiting, trying to read menu boards or trying to understand what they want to eat? So can we simplify? So I think we're trying to simplify our options, one for a health and readiness perspective, but also just from consumption and preparation. And then lastly, I think it's really about, we're learning every day about what that distance and restriction, not calling it social distance, because social and distant is kind of like that's a contradiction, but physically, how do we physically distance in a way where we are allowing people to not compromise the actual experience? Because I think some of my observations have been is that you want to put safeguards in place, but also you put so many safeguards in place where it actually ruins the experience and people aren't apt to come back because they're like, hey, until things are changed, until there's a vaccine, I'm not interested in being there because it's so far from what they have come to expect. So for us, how do we keep some semblance of a great experience, but yet keep people safe? Those are the three things I think we really are trying to focus and solve for.
That's awesome. I look forward to your 2021 season. Hopefully it's going to kick off with a full season and with
That's the hope, man.
max attendance. Yeah. So let's move on to technology. Obviously, every organization is always having that boardroom, topic, technology. How do we switch over to contactless? How do we, transition tickets? How do we do this? And there's always the resistance, having the funds available, but also having season ticket holders adapt to it. Can you tell us, Mike, what the Marlins are doing from the minute they park through entering the building, through purchasing items, whether retail, concession stands, and moving around the park safely? Have you guys adopted anything during COVID? Are you guys testing something? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I would. So when you think about street to seat innovation, I'm proud to announce, so our ballpark, one of the first in the country to we've created our frictionless parking system, right? And so a year ago, we were still collecting cash and credit cards at the time of driving in. Now with partnership with pay by phone, there's the opportunity to prepay for your parking or to pay through your app. And so you're literally driving in. So we found one, it reduces emissions, right, from time of the cars that are idling. So we've reduced emissions by doing that, number one, but also we've reduced contact with an ambassador who's collecting payment. So now you're just driving directly in, which is most important to a consumer. It also reduces the amount of time that it takes for you to get in and park to get into the ballpark. So that piece we're really excited about, and we foresee certainly some opportunity there once we get back to a normalized or a new normal from the parking perspective. Still digital ticketing, obviously not new, but something that we continue to try to work and provide, so that, again, less contact, less waiting. And then on the food side, I think mobile ordering, we're trying to be really thoughtful about how we roll that out. We have not yet rolled it out with regard to delivery. So our suite areas, we do already have a order and delivery system, but how we roll that out outside of some of our suite and club areas, because look, some of you may have seen articles, but the idea of adoption, right? The adoption, one, of how people use it, but also what people are actually looking for. I think this is such an interesting time because people are still trying to understand what their new normal looks like, what they even want. And there are a lot of people in some of the survey work we've done where people say mobile ordering is important when it's, let's call it, when it is isolated in a question. But when you put mobile ordering in terms of prioritizing it amongst, some of the safeguards and some of the other priorities that people want to see, what we found is mobile ordering doesn't necessarily reach the top, the top 2 or 3%. It's in the lower rank of what people are thinking about. That could be one, because they're just not thinking about it because it's not in front of them. And some of their new normal habits are pick up and carry out now in delivery. Or it could be that it's not as important once they get into the ballpark. Either way, we want to be thoughtful about how we roll it out. We're definitely going to have mobile ordering and that capability. And I think, how we do it and to the degree of how important it is to our fans is what we want to pay attention to. And that's what we'll continue to listen to with regard to and how we use technology to also let people know it's time, it's easier to pay, and also on an egress to get out more easily with whether we're using rideshare or, again, for those that drive themselves, how we use that to make that exit less condensed and more easy and freer flow.
That's great. When you guys get there, would you be using one platform, or for food, for parking, or through the Miami Marlins app, or would it be separate different platforms for fans to download to access parking, to access food and beverage, to access mobile tickets?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, as much as possible. One, because of our partnership with Major League Baseball Advanced Media, those that we use, they handle our app production. But I'm a big believer in making it as easy as possible. I know there's certainly for buildings have apps, and team has an app, and then the league has an app. But our goal is to try as best possible to allow everything to flow through one app, or even through a URL that can be in the app. Because we think in terms of adoption, and look, we have the conversation, but, from my perspective, there's adoption that comes through incentives, and sometimes it's a little slower. And then there's adoption that comes from when you pull away the other options. We think the best way to get the adoption is at least to be in an environment that people are used to and they are familiar with, which is our ballpark app, which so as much as possible, that's where we try to drive traffic.
That's great. What about the Buccaneers? Same question. What are they doing from parking to entry and moving around the stadium, even retail?
So before COVID-19 hit, we were already on a pretty accelerated path to be fully mobile for all of our ticketing, all of our parking, all led through the Bucs app, and then further development for the Raymond James Stadium app for other events. So in conjunction with talking with our sports authority, make sure that both events kind of have that seamless operation and people get used to it all the way around. But for Bucs events, we were pretty far down the road. And so we launched this year, even to the point of we have loaded value and discount cards that are usable from our season ticket members and our season pass members. We even put those mobile. So there's not a single paper or anything, if for lack of a better word, and everything is fully cashless. And then shifting over into food and beverage, we were already experimenting at the end of last season with cashless. We had purchased a brand new POS system and purposely purchased a POS system that could continue to upgrade and continue to keep us technologically advanced, and then we could go into further into mobile ordering. So we simply flipped the switch and went solely to cashless at all areas. We were originally going to ease into that, but with COVID-19, we felt the right opportunity was now. And then all of our transactions are dip, tap, and basically scan. So nothing ever happens from a I'll say a cashier to person transaction of the credit card being handed over or anything along those lines. And then we upped our signature areas from a standpoint of signature approval. So we would have less touching of a screen and signing. So we went with that approval on that piece of it. And then we also, just for a pure customer convenience, we installed reverse ATMs throughout the stadium. Therefore, if anybody would come up and just not have credit card at all, we can direct them easily to a reverse ATM, put the money in, and out comes a Visa credit card. It's really a Visa debit card, whatever you want to call it, a value card. And that card is acceptable outside of the stadium, anybody who accepts Visa. So it's a pure easy transaction. So there's no perception that, well, you're just getting me to spend a lot of money and then you keep the breakage. So we even went over that far. So currently, after doing all these events, we're seeing really no resistance, no complaints from why can't I use cash? It just doesn't exist. We were anticipating a lot more before COVID hit. We thought we were going to get a lot more feedback on that, but it just hasn't, and it's been pretty widely accepted. And then mobile ordering, we enacted through our Bucks app. They just go on to our mobile ordering. We developed that back end of it, and depending on what section you're in, once you hit the mobile ordering, it recognizes that, and it gives you the stands that are having mobile ordering capabilities. And we only launched with about 8 locations for this first season, because we always prescribe to walk, before we run. And so we're seeing some adoption rate. I will tell you that I think it's a longer time coming. The adoption rate is going to be just like everybody. They're going to a one-time game, and they're like, I'm not going to bother with the app, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm just going to go up to the stand, or hey, I want to go see what they got. So there still is that, which I think is a positive thing. There still is that visual experience of seeing the food and seeing what's going on out there and walking the stadium. So and having the experience. So mobile ordering is there. We've got it, and we're going to continue with it. But I think I'm not sure if we'll ever convert to a whole stadium being that way. So.
Hey, Martin, if you don't mind, if I could ask a question back to you, what did you see in terms of your cash consumers? How heavy cash were you all to those who were when you were making that transition?
So before COVID, when we were getting ready to rip the Band-Aid off, we wanted to get down to below 30%.
Yeah.
And going into the end of the season, we were still sitting at 34. So we knew that if we got below 30%, we could fairly easily rip the Band-Aid off. But then when this hit, we just tore the Band-Aid off, and that just tells us we were a little bit too conservative in our thinking on that one.
Great, thanks.
That's awesome. So Martin, with your limited mobile ordering, I think you alluded roughly 8 stands. Are you guys doing delivery to seats as well as pickup, or just pickup?
We took the position of delivery to seats only really contradicts everything. We're just going to have one more person interacting with our secured pod of patrons. We operate on the pod system, so everybody in a pod of 4 tickets or a pod of 2 is seated with the right social distancing around them. So it's kind of, we're going to now introduce somebody walking through the various parts of the stadium, past the other pods, past everybody else to deliver this. No, we're going to go with mobile order pickup. So that was our strategy, our philosophy. Maybe in seat, delivery will come back. You know, I was a guy that did it back in 1993, believe it or not, in-seat delivery. So we all know how profitable that is. So we're open to mobile ordering on the pickup rather than the delivery for all sorts of reasons I just said.
Yeah, it's smart. I mean, operating with the pod system, having people move around, you're contaminating those pods. So that's smart. Mark, we have a question. What is the cost of the reverse ATMs? Is it a rental? Do you pay per card? That comes from Dan.
Yeah, it's a lease deal, minimal, and we chose to. There is a fee per card. We chose to pick that up as the Buccaneers for our guests. We chose not to pass that on to the consumer.
That's great. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. I'm working with a bunch of clients from NBA and MLB, and artificial intelligence has become, part of the conversation, every conversation, to understand how fans are moving, to understand line queuing and concession stands. Are you guys doing any of that on concourses, ramps, entry points, any artificial intelligence where you see a heating map and you know where people are and you're dispersing support to move people around the stadium safely?
Who would you like to answer that?
Martin, please. Sorry,
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
there.
So we kind of adopted from a standpoint of how to signage and how to put people and make them go through various areas. We of course went to a stanchion mode of all of our food and beverage areas, but also on the concourse we have what we consider a 2-lane highway, which is simply people can only walk one direction or the other, distance apart. And so our stadium is extremely signage heavy. So it really directs everyone. The artificial intelligence of taking a look and saying, hey, we're looking at this particular area as a pinch point, or this particular area stand has too many lines, and therefore we need to do that, or this particular bathroom. We have a camera system throughout that can literally, I can tell the person on the 300 level what potential small logo their mask has on it. So that's monitored in our command center. So to say that we wanted to do a heat map, or these new the new camera systems that are telling people where the shortest line is concessions, we adopted having every one of our concessions open. We just decreased our point of sale for distancing, but we have every location open rather than cutting off, well, we're not going to open this whole stand. So we adopted that. So we've had no lines. They don't exist. They just don't exist. So we haven't seen any need for that type of artificial intelligence. I know the kind you're referring to, and I guess it does have some of its merits, but we chose to spend it in more of the areas of kind of just a little bit more granular and rudimentary type of the intelligence of seeing the camera and seeing what it is and solving the problem.
Awesome. What about the Marlins? Are you guys doing anything with artificial intelligence coming up for your 2021 season? Putting any information on your app where fans can log on to the app and say, I need to go to that restroom because it's green and not red, with backed up with lines.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it's something that we certainly have considered. We have not implemented. I think, Martin makes a good point. Based on our current capacity or what we are projecting, we get to over 50% capacity. I think there could be more of a rationale based on crowd levels. At this point, there are no lines, right? And there are reduced lines based on how we have scheduled either ingress, there'll be scheduled entry, as well as a scheduled exit egress. But I think there are a couple of key areas where the survey work we're doing, it serves the purpose of what AI does. Well, so one, the AI piece on understanding what customers are expecting and doing, we're trying to do that work through our survey, right? So understanding what safeguards we need to have in place, what would it take to get them to come back? How are they thinking about coming back? How are they operating in their current lives? We've tried to use that not only as in survey work, but also as a touch point, a personal touch point for our sales team so that we can understand, these are really unique challenges we're going through, right? And so we're trying to find ways that we can person to person have contact with a prospective buyer or current members so that we can understand how they're doing and what they're doing. So that's what we're doing person to person. I do think though, as we continue to think about how we service guest services, customer service, there's opportunity to look at AI more deeply there to reduce, obviously we're going to have our sections for customer service and guest services on the promenade with the proper plexiglass and PPE. But also I think as people are asking the questions, where can I find ice cream? Where can I find this line? Things will be a little different from what they remember. We'll continue to evaluate that as our crowd size continues to grow. But at this point, for line queuing, for restrooms, because we also want to be really, really careful in the onset of enforcement, meaning to make sure people are wearing masks, we've actually spent more on staffing to actually staff those areas so that there can be a gentle nudge and reminder to keep your mask on to where people should move. And we think it doesn't increase overall traffic much, but it actually provides people an opportunity to hear from someone else about kind of a gentle reminder where they need to be and what they need to be doing.
That's great.
And one thing I'll add, Louis, one thing I'll add is we do have a text messaging system and a chat bot system that people can inquire on to certain things that they want. So and where they might want to go or where they need to happen, and that's all loaded with. It could be every question from I'm in section such and such, what's the nearest bathroom, that type of thing. So we have a whole chatbot system that does that, along with a text system that also is manned. So that's the other piece we do.
That's good. I mean, that's great communication throughout and allowing fans to not only address, the bathroom issues, but, address other critical opportunities as, this person's not wearing masks or any other threats. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the bad word, the new normal. How does food look in your venues right now with the Buccaneers and leading up to the 2021 season with the Marlins? From grab and go markets to prepackaged food, how does your food program look? I know we talked about the refillable popcorns or refillable sodas. What are we doing with these nice open face Cubans and the burger with the lettuce coming out? What we were trained, to do many years ago. Martin, do you want to get us started with that?
Yeah, so we immediately took the approach of bundling for sure. So we scaled down our menu items at each location and went with 2 to 3 great items and bundled them together, whether that be burger with fries, with a soda, whatever. But what that literally the ordering of a number one, if you will. And through that, we then bought and sourced containers that are not only on some occasions or do they have a translucent cover, but they also lend well to holding an item and being ready to give it to them. And then when the person sees it, they see all the components of what they got right then and there. And we really haven't had to cut back on, I'll say, quality of that side of it. We launched a barbecue concept that is this year that is probably some of the best barbecue arguably in all of Tampa. So we smoke it on site and do our whole barbecue, and cannon fire barbecue it is, and it's full out there front and center under display, and then we simply make the sandwich and they go away with it. But everything is packaged in an individual package item, whether that be a hinge lid, whether that be a clamshell, whatever it may be. But there's always that display item that shows them what they're getting, along with menu board graphics and that whole side of it. So we didn't have to sacrifice quality from that aspect of it. We just had to spend a little bit more in packaging, but that's really where we stood with it. So our sweets and everything else is a different animal, but we have made a lot of changes for the positive there too. So along with our premium clubs and our club levels.
So glad you mentioned sweets and premium clubs, and I'm not sure if you guys have the lower Gallery restaurants still, or they're called something different. What are you doing on the premium side? Is the sweet food displayed under shakers and lids? I know you talked about the single serve utensils earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about the premium side?
Yeah, so we revamped our sweet menu in 2 ways. Number one, we went through a lot of things and identified what could be made as individual servings. the typical, I'll use an example, the typical shrimp platter changes to shrimp shooters. The typical, burger, anything else is going to change to sliders in a bag, individual in that piece. But our biggest change that we did was we want to be sure that people are comfortable, consumer confidence, but we added a suite attendant in every single suite that is in full PPE, including face shield, and is serving the guests accordingly. They never touch the utensils. They never touch anything that's there. We're serving it for them, and therefore you only have one person interaction to the other people. That enabled us to still have some of the great favorite items that are displayed in a suite and out there, and whether that be on a warming unit or whatever that might be on. And so that's the suite side of the approach that enables us to keep that quality up. We're getting really good reviews in our suites. Our Hall of Fame club, our premium club, we put market harvest tables out in front of our entire food display, and we then staffed accordingly, and everyone makes individual small plate servings that people can come up and get to order. With a reduced capacity up there, that's easily done. And it was just a good adjustment. So I would say we didn't suffer in quality at all. I think our premium areas actually might have even increased because the personal attention is there. So that's where
anytime you can get a one-on-one suite attendant to create that experience is remarkable. Are you guys passing on the cost to the suite holder, or are you guys picking up the cost like the concession side?
We are.
Kudos to you guys. That's awesome.
We're not passing it on. Again, we have to. Now's the time to do right by the consumer.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about in South Florida, Miami? What are you guys doing in 2021 with your food programs? What is Levy showcasing to put forward to keep your food, safe and keep the quality there? I know you guys are 305, bringing your subs in, your local restaurateurs into the stadium, which is pretty cool. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned the Cuban, right? So I think it's important that quality is not lost, and much like when we talk about safety, cleanliness, health, I think we can't compromise that ability to come in. One of the biggest or most important things in terms of nostalgia is that sensory experience when you come into a baseball park, right? If it's sausage and onions, or it's peppers, or it's a hot dog or peanuts, like that idea of seeing and smelling what you're used to is really key. And I don't think you have to lose that. I think Martin mentioned the barbecue concept. I'm sure you can probably smell that when you're around. So that's really impactful in how people understand it. And so I think people are willing to, it's not compromise on quality, but some of the presentation that they may have seen a year or two ago, the presentation may look differently, but if they smell and then they see something that's tightly sealed, wrapped, I think that provides a level of comfort that supersedes the presentation that may have been in a different format that may be considered less safe. So what we're priority is focused on safety as well, always, but not compromising. We put a lot of work, you mentioned, in some of our partners where some of the concept is around watching the chef cook it. Well, that can still happen with the right safeguards around, right? The chef can still cook, the food can still be prepared, and then actually how we serve it is what's maybe changed. But that experience of watching and observing and being a part of it, we think in a premium experience, it still exists. And on the promenade level, it still exists. So we'll continue in terms of, I think, popcorn and drinks and refillable drinks, all those things will be replaced, right? So that program is going to look different, but it's not going to compromise the quality. And then lastly, I would say, I've mentioned I was previously at Amazon when this entire idea, the first kind of grab and go supermarket in Seattle, I got a chance to go through, which is kind of freaky, right? You go in, you pick something up, and you walk out and like, well, how do I pay for this? We're not there yet at Marlins Park, but we certainly have advanced to a point of having a grab and go market that we feel can be kind of an initial pilot as we continue to look at other areas where in this market, what you're finding are for those that have gluten sensitivity or allergy sensitivities, or they want a fresh salad, or they want some type of juice program. We have that in this grab and go market. We think part of the post-COVID world, or call it the new normal, is continuing to roll out that grab and go and that new market where people can come get what they want when they want it, that's already prepackaged, even though we're packaging from the concession as well. So we think there's some utility to continue to build out that grab and go market process too.
That's awesome. You know, anytime we can keep that premium experience and keeping the quality of the food, we've worked so hard over the last 10, 15 years to elevate, and we're always talking about elevating the experience. And I get worried when people start talking about reducing menus and decreasing the price. We're like, well, we're going back to what we used to serve 20 years ago. So I'm glad that's not the case, at least in your facilities.
One thing I'll add to that, when you think about the reduction of menu, for many cases, and everybody has to do their own audits, but in many cases you have a large percentage of your menu of what the favorites are, and so it's really up to us to really do the audits to understand. Sometimes reduction of menu doesn't mean we're taking away anything that are really the favorites, because the favorites you're going to keep. It's the
Right.
things that maybe are high labor intensive, but in reality, the put through is not there. And so a lot of time, I think at least for us, I can't speak for Martin, but really the reduction of menu is really to focus on the things that people want more. And so we can provide more time and attention towards that and produce at a high level and at a safety level that I think that people would appreciate.
Yeah, we
Awesome.
didn't reduce our menu as much as we bundled.
Yeah.
We just made it easy to get all the favorites that you want. Here you go. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with the old number one, I'll have a number one. It's a pretty easy thing. I see it on the picture. I see it in front of me. That's what I want. I'm good to go. So that's kind of where we approached it, and of course you can take out, as Mike said, you take out the items that are just, you look at your end of your year and you've sold sub 500 units of it. It's like, okay, that's not enough. So,
Are you guys doing any comboing in Miami? Any bundles?
One of the things that we've learned, Luis, is that we did a couple of watch parties as we were going through our playoff run, which we're still excited about, right? So what we found, so when you think about the idea of mobile ordering as a concept of either delivery or pickup, the way that we try to do some of our loaded tickets and bundling is allowing people to actually pick up as they enter, so they don't feel the need to come back up or to leave. And so we're thinking about programs of how we bundle ticket and load. So it's a loaded ticket. There are several options to choose from as you purchase your ticket, and then as you go to your seat, you're actually picking up and going to your seat, which then decreases the need to kind of get back up or go back up, especially in this initial phase where we're trying to reduce foot traffic.
That's awesome. So, from a safety perspective, and having worked in the NBA, MLB, NFL, facilities before, removing caps of waters and sodas and beer, what has MLB, have they lifted that ban where we're touching the caps, and NFL, what are they doing? You can start, Mike.
They have not. At Levy, we have had the conversation. We've started doing so. We've started allowing, so we're not touching caps and bottles at this point. But again, we haven't had a live game. I would assume there are a couple things. So one, with regard to like bags, we've removed bags from entry, right, as another touch point on the security front, as well as we're allowing consumers to keep their bottles, and we're not touching caps at this point, but that's a Levy Marlins decision and not an MLB decision. I am fully intending to understand, and I'm sure a decision will come down before the end of the year, or at least early spring training, of exactly what that program or what MLB will mandate. But for us initially, we're allowing customers to keep for now.
What about you, Martin, and the Buccaneers?
We've played around with a host of different ways. NFL is pretty adamant of their policy, and that even goes for various stadium venues. That's who I think invented the must remove the cap, and we've had the concerts of pour overs, and we've had all this other type of stuff. And I, for the life of me, still can't figure out, why anybody would like to throw an $18 beer at somebody, but okay, no problem. But anyhow, so maybe we just raise the prices till they won't throw it. No, We basically have adopted a couple things. You know, we have all of our servers in PPE and gloves and constantly changing out and doing that type of thing. So we are unscrewing the cap and keeping it. So that at that point in time, we're keeping it and handing it to them. If somebody is very sensitive to it, and I've seen it actually occur, and it actually they appreciate it, we're literally letting them, we're handing them the bottle and letting them remove it by themselves. And we just watch. We got a little canister and they just throw it in there and they're good. They walk away from the location. They've removed it themselves and it's totally fine. So it hasn't been an issue. We'll see where we stand when we go to full capacity, if everybody is still this sensitive. But right now it's kind of been a non-issue at that point because we've accommodated in that way.
That's awesome. Let's get to a question from Heather Clark. She is struggling with plexiglass and communicating to consumers in a concession environment, specifically when they're popping popcorn. It's hard for them to hear. Are you guys using plexiglasses for your concession fronts, or you know, face shields, or what are you guys doing, Martin?
So we have individual plexi in front of every point of sale terminal. So it's a 38 by 28 shield, which add that to the counter, it puts it at about 6'2", 6'3" total coverage, and it's literally the width of the point of sale terminal, with a small spot on the other end of it where you can hand over what you need to hand over, or around the other side where they just pick up from that either side of picking up the item. We haven't had a huge problem with hearing on our concession locations. Where we did run into that problem is our guest services booths. We had a lot of guest services and information area where they just plexiglass right across the front of it, a full across the counter completely. And they had to go actually back and cut in holes and speaker and be able to hear through it and do that whole thing. And that goes for our concierge desks up on the suite level as well. Plexiglass the whole thing, and nobody could talk, right? So it's, you know, we absolutely had an issue. We learned that right after our first game. So got a lot of holes that we cut in through there, and you know, it still serves its purpose, because you're not going to have people, you know, putting their nose in the hole and talking through it. It's just it allowed the sound to come through, and it pretty much solved it. So plexiglass, that's what we did, but we did adopt plexiglass everywhere.
That's awesome. What about you, Michael? Are you guys having conversations at Marlins Park to do any plexiglass or single shields, or
Yeah, we're looking at
approach?
both, Luis. Both. It just will depend on. It will depend on the service we're providing, right? So to the point I think I raised earlier, guest services. How we, first of all, staff will be in full PPE, which will include a face shield. Obviously, floor markings to prevent or keep some type of physical distance, right? I think we'll probably won't go with full plexi for the reason that Martin listed, because it would be very difficult to hear through. But also, when we think about our partners at Fanatics and Levy, every POS, every point of sale has that protecting on the counter. So we'll go in that direction. I think differently as we look at parking solutions, and also where I think is what we still will have to continue to work through is our guest services piece, because we don't want to lose that touch point, but at the same, I think that's where you have the highest probability of back and forth conversation, and we want to be able to hear. I mean, what's helpful, especially as you limit your menu, you can almost 1, 2, 3, or 4, you know, say that's what I'm looking to get. That's more difficult to say that I need a seating change, or I'm having a challenge at my seat. That's more of an in-depth conversation. So I think on the guest services side is where we're going to have to continue to think through. And I think it's also adapt based on the conditions. We see what's happening, and then we'll continue to adapt. We might have to drill some holes. We may have to, you know, focus a bit more on the chat function to get that feedback on the service side. But we're open and haven't made a hard decision on either.
Little speaker systems with a microphone and a speaker where you can push the button, you talk on the other side.
We definitely got the Disney model outside. We have headsets, and I'm not opposed to bringing that inside to assist. We obviously don't want to broadcast when somebody's having a personal issue to
Yeah.
everybody else. But we definitely are trying to think through that.
That's awesome. Martin, getting back to you. So, I mean, we talked a lot about technology. We talked about food. You have a pretty big game coming up that's being hosted, hopefully in February at Raymond James Stadium. What is the NFL adapting from the policies that you guys put forward? Are they coming in with their own? Can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between the Buccaneers, Raymond James Stadium, Tampa Sports Authority, and the Super Bowl?
Yeah, sure. So starting back in really late April, when we started addressing the possibility of a relaunch or preparing for the NFL season, the NFL really took a strong stance on developing stadium preparedness guidelines that would apply across every stadium and every NFL team. And that involved at first, obviously, just team operations and practice facilities and those types of things. But as you get into the stadium, it involved a significant, I'll say, best practices sharing among all of our stadiums as to what's going to happen. And it really laid the blueprint for how we were going to operate. And whether this was planned or not, I would say it's probably or not. We now find ourselves still in this environment, and here comes Super Bowl. So luckily, even a blind squirrel gets a nut now and then. We were able to just take that overall good plan and say, here's the same format that we use at Raymond James Stadium. This is what we've done, and we've had success. We've actually hosted a significant amount of people. We're having success with that. So let's not vary too far from all of these painstakingly developed guidelines and processes. And that goes across everything. That goes across from parking. We now have an EPG, which is an event procedures guidelines, which is going to be for all the special events surrounding the stadium. And that goes for everything that you can imagine that has to do with COVID-19, from PPE, everything we've been talking about on this conference call. So we really do feel like we're set up for that. And the NFL has done a great job, I think, with really keeping this very inclusive of all the teams. So we have a single united path moving forward. And if we're gonna do mask enforcement one way, that's what we're gonna do in all the stadiums. So that way the patrons realize this is what they're gonna expect. The know before you go on every team's app that's coming to a stadium. You can go on just about every team's website and look at a know before you go. You're gonna see strikingly similar approaches. And that's all due to the efforts of really each team's NFL liaison, and we call ourselves the infectious control officers. So, and the infectious disease emergency response team. Okay, so that just means it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of everything for really nothing else. But I think that we do have a good plan, and I think that's what the NFL is really leaning on, that they put this in place. And so I think we're prepared for the Super Bowl.
That's awesome. It sounds like you also work for Dr. Fauci as well, with all those fancy titles. That's great. I think we're pretty much out of time. I'll open it for final thoughts for you guys to share any insights. Maybe, is Tom Brady going to make it into the Super Bowl at Raymond James Stadium, or what the Marlins are doing for their 21 season, before we turn it over to Chris and ANC.
First Super Bowl in history, home game. Go Bucks. That's all I got to wrap up.
Go Bucks. What about you, Michael?
First of all, the Florida teams have been hot this year, right? You got the Rays going to the World Series. You got Tampa. You got the Bucks playing well. The Heat went to the finals. The Marlins went to the playoffs, and we'll see what the Dolphins do, as well as the Lightning and the Stanley Cup. So it's been a great year for Florida sports. So that's number one. We're excited about that. But most importantly, I think what I'd leave with everybody is just some encouragement. Look, the only thing that we know that is constant is change, right? And I think all of us would do ourselves a service to kind of just take a deep breath and know that we don't know we don't know what December is going to look like, let alone what March, April, May of 2021, but we're hopeful. And, to the extent that we can just kind of take a deep breath while we're making our many revisions and plans. And listen, there's 10 different models for what I think the season will look like. And somewhere in there, hopefully we'll land. But just take a deep breath, relax, enjoy the fact that we're working in an industry at a time that we can, have these conversations. And for those that have experienced setbacks, the industry, food and bev, will continue to come back. Stadium games will come back, fans will come back, and we'll all rebound and be better for this from what we've learned. So just stay encouraged.
Awesome. What a treat. And thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Chris, to giving me the opportunity to, join this call with two amazing venue operators with two amazing organizations. Thank you, Martin and Michael. It was definitely a treat and a pleasure of mine to be moderating this call and learning so much from what you guys are doing, and God bless you guys, and stay safe, and let's get back to 100% fans, and let's have a good 2021 year. Chris?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Lewis and Martin and Michael, and we send out our good thoughts to Alan Johnson, who wasn't able to join us today as well. Just some reminders, getting through the week here. Your one link gets you into all of the NAC educational sessions and the annual meeting tomorrow. Also, a couple people did it yesterday, but we'd like to see more participation. Get out and get some exercise this week. We've got the virtual fun run. The first 30 submitted selfies will receive a beach towel courtesy of Promotion in Motion. And that has gotten off to a start, but there's plenty more towels for you to get. You can either send us a message on one of our social media platforms, or send that picture to info@naconline.org. Also want to remind you that the Retreat Week page on naconline.org, we've got some terrific venue tours. And we heard some great operators here today, but we've got some venue tours. The Lacrosse Center in La Crosse, Wisconsin. We've got AT&T Stadium and the Legends group there. Take us on a nice highlight tour. The Tivoli Theater of the Chicago area, and that's Classic Cinemas. And then we've got a sizzle reel of the Amway Center in Orlando. Also, there's some bonus features on the Retreat Week page. We have the debut of episode 3 of Laboring with a Multi-Generational Workforce podcast. The first 2 episodes are also there, and they've enjoyed a lot of listens, and the new episode is out. So make sure you give that a listen. And of course, we've got a few months ago, Dan did a webinar on sharpening up your resume for those in the industry who are unfortunately displaced right now. Great resource for you, and please avail yourself to that. All right, now for the second highlight of the day. The first one was some great content from some great guests, but today's door prizes. The first door prize we're giving away today is another 5-pound Hershey bar, courtesy of the Hershey Company. And let's see who our winner is. It is Ron Kruger of Southern Theaters. All right. Trinchero Wines donated a golf bag to give away. And the winner of that prize is Jackie Bray of Home Market Foods. Okay. The third prize is 2 stay-at-home pretzel kits, courtesy of Ben's Soft Pretzels. And that winner is Carol Moore of Moore Theaters. And then we have a dozen Titleist Pro V1 golf balls, courtesy of Vivian. And that winner is Gina DeSanto of Taffet and Associates. And then finally, we've got a cornhole set, courtesy of Coca-Cola. The boards are in the shape of a can of Coca-Cola, really cool looking set. And that winner that's going to be Donald Terry of Melco Theaters. So those are today's door prizes. All right. We want to remind you this afternoon at 2:30, just in a little bit, we've got what the election results mean for the concession industry. Don Leary's heading a blue ribbon cast of experts in that discussion. And I know you're going to want to tune in to that. All right. That being said, I don't think Dan has anything else to add today. So you've been watching Retreat Week, and that's brought to you by NAC, where food meets fun. We'll see you this afternoon, everyone. Goodbye.